Hey guys, sorry it's been over a week. Life is just happening and happening. To keep tabs and see what's going on, follow me on Twitter at Hollywood311. I also am working on another video that will just cover one particular creepy situation. I really think you'll like it. Please like and subscribe. That's right, all of you lurkers. Do us both a favor and subscribe. I could really use your support. And I could really use some subscriber stories, so email me at HollyWizzle311@AOL.com. Alright guys, peace. For a quick bit of backstory, I'm 25, female, and a commuter. I live about an hour away from where I work, and I drive an old car that I'm replacing soon. A few weeks ago, I had a bad cold. I'd even lost my voice, so I decided to stop by a clinic after I clocked out. By the time I got out, it was dark. The good thing about that is the area of the city I work in is fucking abandoned after dark, so I knew it wouldn't take me quite as long to get home as it usually does. I sometimes hung around the area until dark just for this reason. I got stuck at a punishment light near my job that takes about 5 minutes to turn green if you don't make it. I pulled up just as the light turned red and cursed quietly to myself. I barely noticed the guy who pulled up beside me at first, but a few seconds later after he did, I felt that hackle-raising primal unease that comes when you feel someone is staring at you. I looked. A large beaten-up white van that looked like it belonged to a try-hard horror film had pulled up beside my car, and the driver was an older man. He was smiling at me. His smile was like a combination of Freaky Fred and the Cheshire Cat, but with less teeth. There was something horribly unnatural about it. I don't know what to do. I smiled back, softly, trying to reduce some of the tension. Sure, he was just being friendly. He started waving rapidly and shouted something that I think was, "You're beautiful," but I'm honestly unsure. I was a little wigged out. I smiled again and stared back at the road, hoping he would stop, but I kept feeling his smile. I figured once the light turned green, I'd lose him, so when it finally did, I took off as quickly as my old chuggy car could take me. A few seconds later, I noticed I was being tailgated because headlights filled my car. They were flashing. I looked back and this guy was behind me. I wondered if I was dragging something or if I had a flat tire and he was trying to help and be nice. But I realized quickly that that wasn't it when I saw him getting even closer and saw the look in his eyes in my rearview mirror, that smile. He was laughing by then. My heart raced. I felt very aware of the fact that my car can't maintain a high speed for long, and that there would be times it would hesitate or slow down, and then it might give him enough time to hit me. I merged into the next lane without signaling when I felt my car start to slow down a little bit. He did too. Then I noticed the bridge. I crossed into the next city. My city was coming up. At this point, he had been following me for 5 minutes. I figured maybe I was being paranoid, and knew there was no way he would follow me that far. He had to give up, right? So I tried to calm myself down and took the bridge as fast as I could, trying hard not to look in the rearview mirror. When I felt my car slow, I either merged or started to pull into the next lane a little like I was going to. He seemed to be copying my moves exactly. 10 miles. I started to think about pulling in somewhere and asking for help, but I had a feeling he would follow or grab me if I tried. Plus, I sounded like a dying goose. I remember how my mom was once followed and tried to ask for help, only to have the people laugh at her and try to give her over to her pursuer. I decided to use my knowledge of the area to my advantage instead. I sped up as I approached the next turn, and he sped up too, still grinning. I took the wide turn and stepped on the gas to take off down the road fast before my car could hesitate. By the time he tried to copy me then, it was too late. I was gone. I heard him skid, but not crash. By the time he could have recovered and gotten around the corner, I was gone. 15 miles. I never hang around there after dark anymore. So this happened to me when I was 15 years old. I was a really wild child. And one random Friday or Saturday night, my best friend Josie had come over to my house. We had spent the most of the afternoon in my front yard, doing gymnastics and shit. And while we were cartwheeling through the grass, this old rusty pickup drove past, slowing down as he got closer. The man in the truck turning to stare as he rolled by. Seriously, I remember watching it because people usually fly down the dead road I live on, not slow down. We joked about the man because he had a baseball cap on and his face was hidden by the shadow of it. He had long, scraggly gray beard and was obviously checking out our pubescent bodies, and quickly forgot about it. Later that night, we had made plans to sneak out of my house to see Josie's boyfriend. It was super easy to do. My dad's bedroom was on the opposite side of the house, so he wouldn't hear us, and my bedroom window was really tall, and only about 3 to 4 feet off the ground, along with the fact that it had no screen, so sneaking out was as easy as walking out the back door. We had gotten outside, and we were walking around the front of my house to sit on the porch and wait for Josie's boyfriend to pick us up, when I noticed something in the cornfield across from my house. It looked like a rusty, old pickup truck. The windshield glistened slightly in the moonlight, and there was a tiny light of what could have been a cell phone or a camera lighting up in the interior of the car. A scraggly beard was barely visible in the glow. Immediately, my heart just sunk. It was most definitely the truck that had driven past us earlier, and it was sitting in the field, facing my house. I nudged Josie and pointed it out to her, and we both pretended not to notice it. Maybe he was a farmer. We smoked a cigarette while we waited and continued ignoring the truck, despite the fact that I could almost feel him staring. I had been keeping my eyes on the road, watching for Trent, when we both heard this horrible groaning sound. The guy in the truck was opening his very creaky, squeaky door, climbing out of his truck. "Let's just wait inside," I said as the man started walking towards the road, towards us, his hands behind his back. Josie quickly agreed, and we made a mad dash back around my house. I could hear the man starting to pick up his pace behind us. His shoes were now crunching on the gravel road. Luckily, I had left my bedroom window open, so we bolted through it and slammed it shut, locking it just as a shadowy figure appeared next to the glass. I closed the curtains and Josie turned off my light. We sat huddled in the dark as she texted her boyfriend what was going on. As we sat there, we heard him tap on the glass, scratchy noises like he was running his fingernails up and down. We both started crying, debating whether to call 911 or not. I didn't want to wake up my dad, since Trent had called us in the meantime, saying he was only a minute away and would handle it. Burly redneck boys for the win. And Dad would kill us if he had gone outside to find an intruder, only to have a random boy we invited over to join the ass-kicking. After what seemed like forever, the sounds of tapping had turned into desperate scraping, as if he was trying to get his fingers under the wooden windowsill. Then headlights. Trent, who had snuck over to my house many times before, had driven into my yard, his headlights lighting up my yard and the man standing in the window. There was no more scraping, and Trent's massive truck backed out of the yard a second later. He called us to let us know that the guy had just bolted to his truck, which was confirmed as we heard the screeching of his tires on the road a second later. Josie and I cried with relief. At that point, I was too afraid to leave my house, so I let Josie out with her heroic boyfriend. She froze when she climbed out of the window, hands shaking as she reached down for something I couldn't see, her blonde hair hiding her hands. "Holy shit," she whispered, holding something up for me to see. A huge hunting knife. The tip bent slightly. At the bottom of my windowsill were deep gouge marks. We'd been trying to pry the window open. She climbed back inside, and Trent joined us, the three of us taking turns staying up until it was nearly daylight and Trent had to leave. We never heard from him or saw him ever again, and I moved a couple years later, so the odds are we will never meet again. So this happened to me at my first club experience. Background info. I'm a 20-year-old female, was 19 at the time, and I barely reach 5'1". The size is important later on. I live in a city that has some pretty lit clubs, and in the downtown core we have 2 universities. There's this one club that's super cool, but packed with university students and primarily creepy guys, unfortunately. I'm assuming most clubs are like this. This club was a house at some point that's been transformed into a club, with different floors/sections, like a dance EDM area, a piano bar, a seating area with a pool table and a top patio. Some other areas too, I believe. One of my girlfriends had just turned 19, and she was the last of us, so we decided to go downtown and party at this cool place. Totally makes sense. There was a big group of us, probably 10 girls and maybe 3 guys. Unfortunately, my boyfriend didn't come with me on this particular occasion, and I've always wished that he had since then. At the club, I was primarily with my 2 closer friends, Jamie and Lee. At some point, Jamie and I lost Lee, but it was fine. We were dancing and having a good time. I was starting to feel anxious and just wanted to go back to my boyfriend's place. Lee wasn't answering our phone, and I didn't want to leave Jamie until we found Lee, and they were together. Jamie and I were in the EDM area at this point, and started making our way across the dance floor holding hands so we didn't get separated. Then this guy just starts dancing with Jamie, and being a little pushy, but not creepy pushy, and Jamie starts dancing with him, still holding my hand. Then they start making out, and Jamie's still holding on to me. The entire time I'm thinking, what the fuck? This is so weird. Out of nowhere, I see this figure move towards us, and he's much, much taller than me. Probably 6'5". Definitely seemed taller than my boyfriend, who's 6'3". He kind of looms over and bends in slightly, and in the creepiest tone says, "Hi, how are you?" in my ear. I think I said, "Fine," and tried to ignore him, but he wrapped his arms around my waist, and when I say wrapped, I mean tightly, breath-crushingly near double wrapped his arms around me. Then he starts to straight up pull me into the corner, not even dancing to the beat, but pulling with all his might, trying to get me into the back. I don't think I've ever been so scared of somebody, even though this was such a small moment. Thankfully, Jamie's still holding on to my hand while making out with this guy. I started to lose my grip though, and we almost let go of each other until I could feel her tighten her hand in mine and start tugging me away. The guy she was with finally left her, or she pulled him away, not sure, and with all her weight ripped me out of this guy's arms, and I went flying across into her. This was such a small, probably not terrifying moment, but as someone who is extremely short and tiny, making me vulnerable, it scared the hell out of me, especially the lack of dancing and just sheer force of pulling me back. Maybe he wanted to make out. Maybe it was more. Who knows? So creepy giant from the club. Let's not meet. I'm not sure if this is important, but I'm a girl. 4 years ago, when I was 17, I started dating this new guy. At the time, he was 20. We had met through a mutual friend who I'll be calling Jake. Jake had texted me asking to come over because he had a friend who wanted to meet me. I had just gotten out of a relationship, so I wasn't expecting anything to come out of this meeting. When I got there, Jake was outside waiting for me with his friend, my ex, who we'll be calling Andrew. At first, I didn't think much of Andrew. He was very average looking, a bit taller than me, and didn't talk much. After about an hour at Jake's house, I decided to go home to finish some schoolwork. Andrew asked for my number, so I hesitantly gave it to him. I didn't realize how big of a mistake that would end up being on my part. The next day, Andrew texted me and asked if I'd like to grab a bite to eat with him that night after he got off work. I said sure, and thought maybe I just didn't give him a fair chance when we met. When we got to the restaurant, he seemed very anxious. I asked what was wrong, and he said nothing. As it turns out, his ex was there. She had a restraining order against him, and he was scared she was going to call the police and have him arrested. That should have been my first red flag. A week or so later, me and Andrew were riding around in his truck. He was getting mad at me because I was letting my mom know what we were doing. He started yelling at me and accusing me of talking to other people. He grabbed my phone out of my hand and threw it out of his truck window. I made him pull over so I could get it. In my head, I had already planned to grab my phone and run back to his house, get in my car, and never look back. He caught on to my plan when he saw me looking around when I picked up my phone. I started running and he caught up to me in no time. He picked me up and threw me into his truck. When he got in, he slapped me and told me to never do that again. I cried the entire time it took to get back to my car, which was a total of 20 minutes. When we got there, I got out of his truck, got into my car, and drove off. I was done, didn't want anything to do with him. A few weeks went by, and he was constantly calling and texting me, even after I've told him to leave me alone. Why didn't I just block his number? See, I'm not very good with technology and couldn't figure out how. Eventually, I took him back out of guilt. I stayed with him for another 8 months. That was a huge mistake on my part. I found out from his mother that he's a registered sex offender and has been arrested several times before we even started dating for domestic assault. It didn't shock me at all that he had been arrested for assault, since he had been hitting me for months. What did shock me was the sex offender thing. Once I learned this, it made my decision to leave him that much easier. I mean, I've got a younger sister that's 7 years younger than me, so she was only 10 at the time. When I told Andrew I was leaving him, I gave all of his things back to him and moved back in with my mom. From that point on, I started trying to rebuild all of my friendships and relationships with family that I had lost because of some things that happened while I was dating Andrew. I figured that once I broke it off with him, that would be the end of things, and I wouldn't have to hear from him ever again. I didn't for about a month. Then, strange things started happening. Things in my mom's house would be in places we didn't remember putting them. There would be dirty dishes in the sink when we woke up in the morning when they weren't there the night before. This man had found a way to get into my mother's house. We ended up changing the locks, and that stopped. 2 weeks after that incident, one of my tires was slashed, and my brake lines were cut. I was still in high school, and I found this out on a school day. My mom had to drive me to school that day. I had to get my car to the shop and get it fixed. Andrew found out where I was and came there to yell at me. This continues to happen until I graduate high school. I thought he finally moved on to someone else, when I hadn't seen or heard anything from him in months. Shortly after my child was born in 2014, he started following me again. I got a restraining order against him, and always made sure I had someone walking me and my child to and from where I needed to go. It's been almost 2 years since I've seen him, but I still get constant text messages and messages on social media from him, and it scares me that he's gonna find me again. I've moved several times and changed my number at least 10 times in the past 2 years. I have severe anxiety issues from this experience now, because of how violent he had gotten with me, and that he may one day follow through with some of his threats. Yes, this is a true story. I'd like to start out by saying that I'm a girl, and my best friend at the time is also a girl, and was married to a man that was older than us. When me and my former best friend, who we'll call Leah, were seniors in high school, we had become very close. We would always be spending our afternoons together until her husband would get off work. At the time, my boyfriend and I had broken up. I was pretty upset about it, and she tried everything to cheer me up. About a month had gone by, and I was feeling much better. Leah had been texting me saying she wanted us to go to dinner, so I started getting ready. I was so excited to spend a few hours with my best friend. When we got to the restaurant and had ordered our food, I got a text from someone who said he was Leah's friend and he'd like to get to know me. Apparently, Leah had given this man my number and had him text me when I was with her so she could tell me all about him. He seemed like a really great guy. He was 3 years older than me, was in the army, and had a 3-year-old son. That's when things started getting kind of strange. A few weeks had gone by, and he would never send me pictures of himself, but would be fine accepting pictures of me. He would promise to call me when he got off work, but never would. When I would try to call him, it would go straight to voicemail. Strange, I thought. One day at school, me and Leah had made plans, her husband and this guy, who I'll call Colby, to go out to eat. Of course, I was excited to meet him in person. We planned to meet at 7:30, so we'd have enough time to get ready and get our homework done. 7:30 came and went. Nobody was texting me back. At 9:45, I decided to get ready for bed, since I had waited the whole night for them, and they clearly weren't going to respond. That's when I got a text from Colby's phone. It was Leah saying that Colby had been in a terrible accident and was in a hospital 2 hours away from where we lived. I was so upset. I called every hospital in that area and none of them had a patient with that name. I kept texting Colby's phone, begging for someone to tell me what was going on. I needed answers, closure even. Why wouldn't anybody tell me how he was doing? Why wouldn't they pick up their phone when I called or texted? The next morning, I got a text from Colby's phone. The text said something along the lines of, "Why the hell are you blowing up my phone? You know I'm a married man." What in the world? Colby wasn't married. Him and his son's mother had split up. At least, that's what he told me. Was he lying to me? Was he lying to me and his wife the whole time? Did she find out? I asked him what he was talking about because he had told me he was single. Turns out, Leah had made Colby up. She was using her husband's phone to text me. That's why the phone would always seem to be off at night. Her husband told me that Leah had told him a different story, that I was obsessed with her, and that she needed his phone since I didn't know that number. How could my best friend do this to me? What did I ever do to her? She and her other friends then started threatening to beat me up because I wanted answers as to why she'd do this. I went to the dean of students the next morning and showed all the threatening text messages I had received explaining the situation. He suspended the girls for bullying me, and they left me alone after that. Since then, I've learned to always video chat with someone I meet online so I don't get hurt again. I'm sharing my story because I don't want anyone else to go through what I did. I've had a hard time trusting people, but can you blame me? So former best friend, let's not meet again.